Here they are. Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
hello.
All very good and ready to go. Well done. I was in my back garden trying to put one of those fire pits together for Sally, and it's come in like 10,000 pieces. So it's stretching my engineering skills a little bit. And that's why I've got these glasses that make me look like I'm in an FBI protection scheme. How are we all doing? Everybody good?
Very good.
Good. Pat and Julie, you're good?
Good. A little tired this afternoon, but we're good.
Okay. What you tired from?
Just a long week.
Yeah.
We're at the end of our week. We rest tomorrow, and so we're just, it's time for rest.
I had it down and back, so left Tuesday morning to Philadelphia and came back last night. So
Okay, cool. Well, I work this crazy intensive week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which I always have done, to be honest with you. Wherever I can, I've tried to do that. And so, Mondays, I do lots of other kind of other stuff and writing and recording and all that kind of thing. Fridays is often a travel day if I'm going to go anywhere. We don't do lots of travel these days, but we're traveling to Portland tomorrow. I don't know whether there's anybody over there. Are you on your way? Anybody there? No. I think from the other hubs that are more kind of northwest, they're all coming, so that'll be fun. Yes, and Lila, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I was just with your wife and daughter last week.
You were. They said they had a great time.
It was wonderful. It's been a weird couple weeks, yeah. So it kind of fell right in the middle of some craziness that was happening with us last week, and with a friend who was missing for 4 days in the mountains and was found on Tuesday.
Oh, hallelujah. And they were okay?
Almost perfect. He was okay. He's got a lot of PTSD. They're not believers, this whole family, but we carpool with them, and our sons are very close. They're 7 years old. And so I was already like, oh gosh, how are we going to help our son help his friend through, all that mentally. So Tuesday they found him. It was great and joyous. Monday night, when all this was happening, we officiated a wedding of some people very close to us. So I was like, oh God, stop crying for half a second. Go officiate this wedding, come back. And great and good, but it was crazy. And then Thursday I took off for the Azer Collective, which was a whole other thing,
Sure.
I'm just kind of trying to process and come down from all that this week. But sorry I missed last week. I was flying to Minneapolis.
No, that's good. No problem. Julie, did you go to Azer last week? No. I'm just going to... Go ahead.
I've never been.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're only just starting. I'm just going to move these cables. Hang on a second. I'm going to kill somebody.
That was the first one, but definitely should go to the next one.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, Libby and Sally said that they had a great time. I mean, Joe's awesome anyway, isn't she? So it's going to be great. And we've got Bob and Mark. How you doing, guys? You good?
Doing great.
Great. Very good. Mark,
Yeah,
you good?
Doing very good. Yeah, this is my first time on, so glad to be joining you guys.
Well, I'm delighted you joined us. It looks like you've got a friend that you killed behind you somewhere.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been a long time friend.
It's been a long time friend. That's good. Yeah, that's good. And if he starts speaking to you, do tell us about that before you come on next, won't you?
Oh, for sure I will. Yeah.
That's great. And Mark, where are you from? Where's your home?
Well, I grew up in Illinois. I have lived in the Chicago area before.
Yeah.
Now I'm in the southern part of Illinois.
Oh.
But I'm working at a church in Kentucky, so I cross the Ohio River every day and commute over into Kentucky. So.
Okay. And so, I mean, how close are you to Ohio and all that? I mean, you must be all that near that kind of tri-state thing down there, yeah?
Yeah, not too far from Ohio, maybe 3 or 4 hours to Ohio.
Quite a way then, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I'm glad you're here. Michael, how are you?
Doing well. Sorry I was late. Just got back from a
quick retreat visit, so just made it a few minutes late.
Glad you're with us. Someone remind me what we were doing last week, because by now you know I can't remember, and Mark can't tell us because he wasn't here either. What were we on?
You walked us through kind of the models and the qualifiers.
Good. Yeah, and Mark, I hope that you're able to get the recorded files of these Huddle.
Okay.
If you connect with Libby, she'll sort you out on that.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great.
We've got a bit of a problem right now in the files because I do so many right after each other that the computer's taking. It's actually hard for the computer to compress it whilst I'm doing the other recording. So we're working on that a bit at the moment.
Okay.
But you should be good. Okay, well, what did I give you as an assignment? Did I give you an assignment to look at your memes, understand your models and qualifiers a little bit? Is that what I gave you to do, guys?
You didn't give us a new assignment. A couple of us did a little bit of meme stuff last time that we kind of processed through kind of the covenant and kingdom side of the memes. But
sure. Well, let's do a little bit more of that then. The way to work it, of course, is to understand the process by which we're operating. That we're not trying to have definitive statements about God. I mean, if Jesus needs a multitude of parables and the big models of Father and King to communicate who God is, there's no way that we're going to get anything done in a single model, because clearly Jesus is offering us two big models that qualify each other. If God was just King, then we would be struggling a little bit with how can we be intimate with this God, which of course was an issue for some of the folks who were faithful in the Old Testament. If God was just a father, then we may ask ourselves questions about capacity to protect us from enemies. You know, those would be the kinds of things that would immediately emerge in my mind, and maybe other things would emerge in yours. But just to remind you, I'm using something from Ian Ramsey, who's a lesser-known English philosopher and theologian, who suggested that the insights and understandings, the revelations of God in the Bible are models and qualifiers. Each of the models of God qualifies the others. So God as warrior qualifies God as shepherd. God as healer qualifies God as fire. You see what I mean? So there's all these different models that are operating that qualify the others. And in time we come to a definitive revelation of God. And the definitive revelation of God, of course, is Jesus. Jesus himself is the definitive revelation. And Jesus refers to God many, many times using the big models and the big qualifiers of Father and King, which leads me to the conclusion that as we begin to develop our memes of communication, which should be portable, adaptable, memorable, and reproducible. As we're developing our means of communication, what we're doing is we're asking ourselves questions about content and the capacity to communicate. So we ask ourselves of the meme, does the content, it doesn't always have to reflect covenant and kingdom, but at least in the multiplicity of memes that we use, is covenant and kingdom present? And then in terms of mechanisms of communication, so this is content. And then this is, I'll just use mechanism, but it could be method of communication. We ask ourselves the Warren Wiersbe questions, which is, does our meme, like a parable, give us a picture of God, a mirror on ourselves, and a window on the world? And by window, we're using a meme there. What we mean by that is something that gives us a frame of reference to understand the world. Yeah? So, just using very familiar common stuff that's common to all of us, if you looked at the triangle as a meme, now, you know, it could be an axiom like, what's God saying to you? What are you going to do about it? That's also a meme. It's just a word picture. Triangle definitely gives us all three of these, doesn't it? See that?
Mm-hmm.
Tells us about the life of Jesus, gives us a mirror on ourselves, and helps us to understand our world. You know, you can analyze everything from a small group through to a family, through to a large church. You can do anything you want. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way that every week that you share something in your missional community, in your congregation, in your Sunday school, that you come up with memes, but you become familiar with the process so that you are developing lots and lots of models and qualifiers that in the end give you some big memes, yeah, that you can test against covenant and kingdom and against the methodology of picture, mirror, window. Okay, so there's a summary. Maybe I put a couple of extra things in there for those of you who get bored with summaries. Is everybody good with that? Julie, Pat, Mark, that's the people first on the list there. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Good stuff for me.
All good.
Yeah, I'm following it. It's good.
Mark, suddenly baptized by fire, arriving in the huddle thinking, what? Any thoughts, questions, or comments?
No, not at this point. So Libby had sent me a list of some pre-reading that I needed to do.
Yeah.
So I think I'm tracking along with kind of where you guys are at.
Great. Super. Next in line goes Michael, Lila, and Bob. So Michael, any thoughts?
So yeah, love it. helps to explain a little bit more deeper, like in what you were getting at last time. And then again, the bigger picture is that with the Awakening Huddle movements, you know, a network of movements, basically it's kind of the big why behind this is understanding how to be able to have movemental language that we could then articulate to our particular context. Am I right in that kind of framing for it?
Exactly. There isn't a movement ever existed in the history of humanity that didn't have mimetic communication.
Great.
Yeah? Lila?
I just want to say, Mark, you're amazing if you're following all this. Because I've been a part of it since the beginning. I'm still like, okay, hold on a second. Can you give an example? Okay, so when you just said just a minute ago, we're developing so for me each week with my church or in various huddles, we're developing models and qualifiers working toward the memes. Can you give some examples of the models and qualifiers that helped you kind of move towards some of the memes that you use, like the triangle and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I began to think about what was the kind of simplest way to express the relational work of Jesus. I mean, what were the relationships that he focused on and prioritized? And then obviously you start kind of saying, okay, well, he obviously had a relationship with his Father. Clearly he prioritized a relationship with his disciples over and above that of his family. I mean, that's right there in the text. And clearly he had a relationship that he sought to develop with what he called the lost sheep of Israel, the world. And then what I do then, you see, I mean, because of the training, I apply what's called Occam's razor. And William of Ockham came up with this principle that you should never multiply categories beyond their basic minimum. And so I looked at that and I thought, well, is there another relationship? Does he have a relationship to the Jewish religion? Well, I mean, the Jewish religion is definitely, and the Jewish religious leaders are definitely within the world. So I could definitely put them in that category. And you see what I mean? I'm thinking like that. And now I've got 3 dimensions, or I've got 3 relationships that Jesus has. And they're 3 relationships of love. And they're expressive of the great commandment, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. So I'm kind of thinking about that. And then someone says, it's a bit like 3 dimensions, I guess, isn't it? And I say, yeah, it is like that. And, you know, the 3 dimensions are kind of interesting, but, you know, I mean, how do you express 3 dimensions? And, you know, I looked at some of the ways in which dimensional language was used about the love of God, you know, the heights, the breadths, the depths, and I thought, well, maybe that's the way to think of it. But then I thought, no, maybe we need it simple, because the people I was working with were post-literate people. They could read, but they basically never did, and so I needed language that they could connect with. And I kind of, this is all a process over many weeks. I came up with up and out. And then someone said, well, you could arrange that real easily on a triangle. So over a period of about a year, the triangle emerges. You see what I mean? Maybe a bit more than a year. And then what I did is I tested the triangle to destruction by trying every possible way to make it not work for people. And what I found was it worked really, really well. So so there's a good example. I mean, the thing is, Lila, is that the way we operate, I think, is to assume that 90% of what we do will not work. But that means that you need to produce lots of stuff, if at all possible. Just come up with lots of ideas. And it doesn't matter if they sound crazy, just try them. And I always used to call it the mud at the wall approach. You just throw mud at the wall, and if some of it sticks, then you go with that. And if it doesn't, then you don't go with it. Yeah?
That's good. Do you mind if I ask one more question?
course. Keep going.
So as we've been looking at our particular story and how it factors in and kind of flows into the meme,
Yeah.
is there any example you can give us of kind of how you were seeing that worked out in your personal story too, with the up in and out? It's general enough that I'm sure it was 1,000 ways, but.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's immediate that the meme becomes reflective of your own life. And so if the meme is just a clever statement that doesn't really reflect your life, it doesn't usually come over with a kind of sense of authenticity. And so the kind of if you like, the authoritative memes are the ones that seem to emerge from your life. So person of peace, I think I was the first person to publish that strategy of Jesus. That came out of my life. I mean, that came out of me trying stuff and failing and asking God, what's the strategy of Jesus in the Bible? And in a way, the meme does have a narrative under it, and the narrative is your life's application of your gospel. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I find I don't know. I just always want to see kind of how it's worked out to get to the place, and some of that's like what you just said with the person of peace strategy.
Yeah.
Sometimes when things are conveyed through generations, it's hard to work back to where it started. And as an example to how we're trying to do it, it's really helpful to hear that, like, okay, I started doing this stuff, then I started working to like what's working, what's not. How can I phrase this in a way that other people can understand, blah, blah, blah. So that's really helpful. I appreciate it.
And honestly, it's always a work in progress. BDC, Building a Discipling Culture, the 3rd edition. I mean, who would have ever believed that we'd have had a 3rd edition for a start? But I mean, here we are, we've got a 3rd edition. And, I've worked with the movement. I've worked with different movements around the world using this material. The 7th and 8th shape are not as mimetic as the first 6. So we'll present them differently now. I'm cool with that. It doesn't bother me. Now, person of peace within the 8th shape is massively mimetic, so mimetic that nobody knows that I first published it. So, I mean, it literally has no connection to me whatsoever now. You see what I mean? But you go and ask all the academics and they say, I think you published that first. And I go, okay, well, but I mean, it's got its own ministry, person of peace. And it's, it's not even connected. You see what I'm saying? Well, what are you thinking?
Did you say Mark?
No, I said Bob.
I'm thinking of just even this last week, just trying to prepare a message, just trying to think of, is there a mimetic output for this that could be?
Yeah.
I think I'm just probably trying to look for it more than I ever have before. And
it's interesting, isn't it? It's
What's that?
The memorable bit. What makes it memorable? Well, it kind of works with the rhythm of rhyme. Mm-hmm. It works with alliteration. It kind of, how does that all work? Well, probably the musicologist will tell us it probably sounds like your heartbeat. You know what I mean? That's probably what the musicologist told me. I mean, I don't know that, but that's my wild guess. And so, you start getting covenant and kingdom. You get up in out. You know what I mean? It starts sounding almost like it's kind of got a metronomic kind of reality to it. And it's the way that people remember stuff. Now, I'm not suggesting that we treat people as if they're, imbeciles or infantile. We just remember that. I remember stuff when people do that for me.
Yeah. And I think as a leader and a communicator and trying to build a movement, even within the context of our own spiritual family, that idea of making something that actually is portable and reproducible, it just feels so important, in terms of the longevity of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth the effort. I'm feeling like it's really worth the effort to try to help that with people. And you start to see it when you start to hear the memes back, you know?
Yeah. When you hear them back, especially when you hear them back from people who don't realize where it came from,
Mm-hmm.
then you know you're on it. I remember when Rebecca, she's 33, got 2 children and blah, blah, blah now. I mean, I can remember Rebecca coming back to us and saying, we're going to start this group at church with Joe Saxton. And it's a really clever idea. It's called Up and Out. And you probably never heard of this. And this is how we're going to organize the group, and we're going to go and get some people, and we're going to call them People of Peace. And I said, wow, that sounds amazing. And she said, yeah, will you pray about it? I said, sure. And so we prayed about it. It was like years later. She came back, she went, oh. I didn't realize that was your stuff. See what I mean?
Yep.
That's when it all works. Okay. Who wants to run any of their memes through the filter that we've got here in front of us? Anybody want to do that?
I do.
Come on, Julie.
Yeah. You're going to help me when I'm not quite sure where I'm going, right?
I'm totally going to do that. And I promise you, even though my love language is ridicule, I promise you I won't use that on this occasion.
Okay. So I guess my meme is worship surrounds the supernatural.
Yeah.
And just to give a little background on it, it's definitely for me a kingdom kind of phrase, and meant to it comes out of my value of nurturing faith.
Mm-hmm.
Really encouraging people to take responsibility to nurture their faith, and to be asking the Lord to help them grow in their faith. So for me, it's really more kingdom kind of phrase. So when I was thinking about, and when I mean surround, I mean it precedes or it proceeds, and it's involved during or during as well. The miraculous.
So worship precedes and what? Surrounds, you say?
Proceeds.
And proceeds,
Mm-hmm.
as in from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go on. What else did you say?
So I've been thinking about this week about like what qualifies that, and you tell me if I'm on the right track here as far as that feels super kingdom focused in my heart and in my mind. And so the qualifier I think would be something. One of them would be like, the Father is worthy of work. The Father is good and He's worthy of worship.
Yeah.
Is that kind of more covenantal and
so worship is an expression of an intimate relationship with Father God.
Mm-hmm. And maybe yes, and maybe even worship is even a form that we communicate with the Father, even that expression of communicating. Are those the qualifiers? Is that a qualifier? Okay.
Well, yeah, but because what you've done is you focused on supernatural as, technically what it sounds like you mean by that, and I'll just put that in, it sounds like you mean a sign of the kingdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what it sounds like. Yeah. So
Yes.
the supernatural is a sign of the kingdom, but the signs of the kingdom are preceded by worship, intimate relationship with the Father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So talk to me now. Talk to me now. So let's just do some kind of model and qualifier work. And the way you do this is you drill down into what it is that you're talking about. So already we've now got Father and we've got King. Yeah?
Yes.
And so we've got something about what it is that we are doing in relation to the Father, so that it's about being with him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then this is about him doing and us doing. Yeah.
Yes.
So being with, doing for. So let's go back to your meme now. Is there a way in which you could polish that or rearrange it or reorganize it or re-express it? Because I think you're right on. I mean, the revelation that you're working with is that the supernatural expression of the kingdom appears to be much more common when a person is living a life of worship. Yeah?
Yeah.
That sounds like the revelation you're working with. Is that fair?
It's fair.
Okay, so let's think about it then. Let's think about the word surrounds. You see, I would put it like this. This is the way I would put it. I would put it like this. I'd say worship precedes wonder. Yeah.
Yeah. When I did my, stand on the mountaintop and looked to the Old Testament and to the New Testament, one of the things that I realized was there's actually just a lot fewer examples where the worship comes prior to the miraculous than there is examples of it coming after. Like I was really digging for David and his worship with King Saul, and he drives the evil spirit away. Paul and Silas in the New Testament, they're worshiping, and there's the earthquake, and everybody's set free. There's a lot of Solomon, and he prays for the dedication of the temple, and God's glory shows up. But a lot of the examples biblically that I was looking at are way more the worship follows the miraculous.
Yeah, but maybe it does, and maybe
it doesn't.
It's like a cycle.
Mm.
Maybe it's been going on before.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How about that?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Does that look something like what you've...
Yeah, and I think it's accurate, even thinking about David and his life and who he was as a worshiper.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that was the first time he was worshiping. He was worshiping all the time. So.
Of course. That's my point. And so... Yeah. And it's clearly true of Solomon. He's raised in the home with David. I mean, he'd have the guitar out all the time.
Yeah.
So now I've got something that's really cool now. I mean, I might even steal that.
It's kind of yours.
No, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, I'm joking with you. I wouldn't steal it, but you see where we are with this, Julie, now.
Yes. Yeah. It's way more expressive.
Yeah. So you can say worship precedes wonders, and worship precedes wonders and proceeds from wonders.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can pick up on the circle wherever you want to, right? Yeah.
but I'm not using circle as a learning circle meme.
No.
I'm using it as worship and wonder meme.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm following you. I'm tracking.
I mean, I think worship and wonder meme is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And it's fun to throw some mud on the wall.
Sure. And so when you go to the Asa Collective, you just talk about worship and wonder women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah, it does. It does.
It works for me.
It was easy. It was good.
Yeah. I really liked it. I love that. And do you see what it was that we were kind of driving at?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me just precedes worship. I think is that just spelled proceed? Oh yeah, I know. I got it now.
The C.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And one of those. There we are. So worship precedes wonders and proceeds from wonders. Love it. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I was going to do, if I was going to be cheesy, I'd probably, if I was going to heap up multiple things that give lots of different people different access points. Yeah. I mean, I might even put that in a sermon. I might not use that as my final takeaway meme. Singing surrounds the supernatural, but I might use that as a way to get people towards where I'm looking at. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Great. Who else wants to have a go with? I mean, any got some comments here for Julie? I love this, by the way. I love this worship and wonder circle. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful meme. I think that just as I was reflecting on it, just a different alliteration, his power flows from his presence.
Yep.
With the power being the kingdom peace and the presence being the covenant peace. And I've even sparked my mind thinking about the Lord's Prayer, starting with his presence, who he is, and then moving to his kingdom coming.
Good. Love it. Love it. Anyone else?
Just in thinking about it in relation to covenant and kingdom, worship seems to be that space between covenant and kingdom, because we're relating to God. We are, as we worship, we are relating to him as children, yes, but we're also relating to him as subjects, as worshipers of the King.
Yeah.
So it's it's sort of in between those two spaces.
And I think that there's a cycle within worship very often that gets us to engage with God as Father and then respond to him as King. So, being sent out by the King is always a component of Christian worship, isn't it? So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. But I mean, Julie, I would take a screenshot of this girl. You got loads of stuff here. This is like gold, isn't it?
Did already.
Cool. Any and by the way, Mark, that's a good qualifier on the model. So that makes us think a little bit more about it and kind of wrestle with it.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the things about, I forgot the philosopher, it's like Santiago, I think, but the idea is that we're always pressing through complexity to find simplicity, and that simplicity is the goal. Yeah, you press through complexity to find simplicity, and simplicity is not something that's simplistic. Exactly the opposite. Complexity is very often simplistic because it just means that people haven't done enough work to actually make it simple. Yeah? Great. Who else wants to have a go? Anybody else want to pitch in?
I'd love to, unless somebody else is stepping up.
Come on.
Yeah, you got it. So, gosh, I've got a few that I feel like I'm working through. So let's do. So I've got this theme that I'm working at for our wider region. So the 22 different churches across Central California, trying to cast some vision and direction for being a unified, network of churches when we've not really had much connectivity. And so I'm using the table as the imagery.
Yep.
And kind of the phrasing that I'm playing with is there is room for everyone at the table. And then kind of the kingdom side of it is there is a mission for everyone from the table.
Yeah.
In the table kind of imagery, I'm definitely thinking about how Jesus did so much of his life and ministry literally at the table, whether that was with Zacchaeus or whether he was invited there or he invited himself there. Of course, the Lord's Supper table. You kind of see the covenantal table from the Old Testament, just all of the meeting that takes place there, which from, quick glances, it does look more covenantal for the most part. But then I guess maybe the imagery goes a little bit more King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, that there's mission from there. It's not just a meeting for the sake of meeting, which is what we've been really good at as a movement and as a network of churches, just meetings for meeting's sake, but the idea that we meet together for covenant and because of covenant. But from there, there's like mission that comes from there. So it's like that centralized and decentralized, the movement toward the gathering and then from it for the sake of mission.
Yeah. Of course, you're going to get yourself into trouble with people about King Arthur.
Yeah.
So where I would go is Psalm 23. He sets a table in the presence of our enemies.
So good.
Yeah. So clearly we're being protected at the table, but we're also being provisioned for the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
So there's provision, there's protection, and I mean, I don't know where you want to go with that, but clearly there is a protection there, but you're being provisioned,
yeah,
for the fight, aren't you?
Yeah. one of the kind of scriptures I've been thinking about for the kind of kingdom side of it, again, the language is a mission for everyone from the table.
Yeah.
And I'm just really thinking about that Ephesians 2:10, that God has prepared works in advance for us to do. And I just see that applied so, individually, that it's not just collectively, although that is true as well, but even individually, he's prepared works in advance for us to be able to do.
Yeah, and you receive those at the table, is what you're saying.
At the table, yeah, because I mean, in a sense, it goes back to the worship and the wonder that Julie was just talking about.
Sure.
It almost feels like kingdom flows from covenant, that mission flows from community and connectivity, and so the king is the one assigning it, and so we got to be close to him to ever hear the assignment and discover that.
I think that I totally go with that. I think if you want to do the other king thing, then what we need to do is we need to look at the eschatological nature of the covenant meal, that it's until he returns. So it's a prefigure of a greater feast. And and so we are being provisioned for the extension of the kingdom that will be finally consummated and manifest at the return of the King.
That's great.
Yeah?
That's great. Kind of one other angle too for the covenantal side, that room for everyone at the table. There's a lot of disunity. So we've got, really it's like basically the churches of God in Central California that are our Black churches. And we actually have used different language, though we meet together and we've been, kind of taking the hand of every blood-washed brother. That's one of our memes from the early 1900s. We still divide, even by the way that we associate. And then we've got the Hispanic concilio. And so that's kind of one of the key themes that I'm wanting to do. There's room for everyone at the table, and there's one table that we're gathering at, not three tables for our particular context that we're gathering, with.
Yeah. I like that. I think the other thing is that the meme that I've often used as, when people say, well, why do you always focus on food? And, why does all the learning communities have meals and blah, blah, blah. The meme that I often use, and I'm not even sure where I got it from, to be honest with you, but it's somebody else's. But it's one of those kind of folk ones. Everyone has to put their weapons down to eat.
Yeah.
And it's a description and an imperative. So it's a description and a command. So in your situation, that would help, wouldn't it?
It would. It really would.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about how I've heard you and Steve Cockrum say too, that meals and mountains, that basically most of the ministry of Jesus' life, is around meals and mountains, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, that's an old meme of mine, which is if you take the meal times and mountains out of the Bible, it's about 50 pages long.
That's great.
Yeah. So you've got quite a lot there now, haven't you?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So when you, it may be that you can use the imagery of the table. Maybe you can use the imagery of the table. I don't know. But it may be that you can kind of come up with something. You've got the King Arthur thing in there. The Arthurian legend is deeply written into Western culture, and so you can probably, kind of use an image of the table. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because, see, there's this whole other bigger picture for like the whole movement on a national level. Like I've been invited to the table where they're really going to be making some decisions for the next, next epic of Church of God on a national level. And so I've been really playing around with that low control, high accountability language. I was curious about like the mimetic story behind that, because it sounds like it's coming from a matrix. And I'm realizing that, we kind of play around in some of those things, except we use the words unity and we use autonomy. Those are key values in Church of God, but those are warring values. And we end up, our autonomy like leads us to separate and kind of to this Wild West context where we don't actually do any unity at all. But we cry out for unity, but yet we value autonomy. And I'm kind of realizing like the valley of the shadow of death. If we're ever going to experience the joined up part of unity and autonomy, which is really about empowerment at the grassroots level, then we're going to kind of feel like we're giving away our autonomy in order to be able to gain some sense of unity that lets us not just be that blob of Christ.
Yeah. Well, and then it's the old meme of unity and diversity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, is everybody following what we're doing here? We're just riffing. We're just surfing. And, we're beginning to try things out. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. And very often you need another voice and another pair of ears to kind of help you do this. But I think I'd probably say right now that you've got probably enough material now to start kneading the dough with this kind of leaven here, Michael.
Yeah.
I mean, you can season your communication with these phrases.
Absolutely.
Can't you?
And I think it's just interesting, because I'm thinking again about movemental stuff, the bigger output that I believe you're wanting to see happen, in and through us. And you're right. Some things stick and some things don't. And some things that I thought, well, that's brilliant, and it just goes nowhere. And then other things that I thought were like, that was just a throwaway, even off the cuff thing, maybe the Holy Spirit gave. And it's like, whoa, that really resonated with people. And it's driving bigger things than just me. And so I'm thinking about, like your blog, that selfless meme. I see more of what you're getting at with all of that. That's really, the lights are coming on there.
Well, and, it's a bit like, somebody said to Lee Trevino, why is it you're so lucky when you play golf? He said, because I've hit 2 million golf balls more than you have. He says, it's amazing how lucky I get the more I practice.
Yeah.
Well, the same is true about this. You come up with amazing memes, apparently, just by getting struck by lightning, the more practice you put into it, because actually you're developing a muscle. This is a muscle. And you kind of, you grow in your capacity, and then you see it, and it operates much more quickly.
Yep.
Yeah?
That's great.
Comments from anyone?
Just for me, just put in the chat box there, fellowship at the table to fuel the mission. Just kind of wondered if that was carry on with what you're saying. One leads to the other. Covenant leads to kingdom. So
great stuff.
Fellowship at the table does what?
Fuel the mission.
Fuels the mission. Yeah, I love that. And I like that because you've got the provision in there, which is great. The provision for work. Yeah.
And I wondered about fed at the table to fuel the mission, but I think the more I heard you talk, the more I heard fellowship show up.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got my attention, Michael, when you talked about the different people groups. and that they are segregated. And my question is why? And maybe they can shine some light on, there may be tables that have been built that haven't actually been welcoming. They seem like, come sit here in their space, but if it's only from one perspective, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just curious, like, if they would have some input into why the table hasn't felt, either there hasn't been a table or it hasn't actually, we can, you know what I'm saying? Like with the diversity thing. So yeah, that's kind of one that stood out to me, was like, what does a table look like for it to truly be welcoming and not just a space that's from perspective, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's not to help with the meme part, but just with the processing and with the people.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's just an observation, that we value unity, declare it, and yet we have individualized gatherings. Now, there's reasons for those things from a language perspective, maybe, but I think it's like the high school campus where you've got the 3 different tables with the different groups gathering together, and which one do you go at? And I think, my life in general, being, Mexican and then a whole, mixture of white, like my life is that table. I am that table where both of those merge together. Now, I don't have any African-American, influence in me, but I see that then because of understanding those distinctions there. And so I've just been telling people like, hey, I'm going to lead this like there aren't differences here. And I'm assuming we're all showing up to the table and everyone has an invitation to that table versus kind of just letting the individual tables continue to happen, so to speak. So, but I think that's great input.
Yeah, I was actually even thinking if you do some sort of pictorial representation that's, and this could be the wrong direction because of what you just said there at the end, but instead of having one color, having it multicolored or something. So like there are pieces of all these things, and that's why it's welcoming. Not because we're pretending, but because we're recognizing the diversity and saying there's still unity in the midst of it. So I don't know, just
beautiful.
That's cool. I love it. We're about at the moment where we stop. Anything else to add? I hope we're finding this kind of helpful. It's not just an exercise in kind of obscurantist thinking here. What we're going to do next week is we're going to start moving the conversation away from meme. I realize that you're looking at it and thinking, well, I need to do like 12 years on this. I get that. But we're going to come back to it at the end of the huddle. And by that stage, you'll feel like the muscles have been much more developed and you'll feel much more equipped to get on with it. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to start moving into contextualization. And I'll do a little bit of teaching next week, and then we'll do some conversation around that so that we can begin to navigate what it means for us to learn the skills of contextualization. All of you are contextualizing all the time, but you're doing it intuitively. What we're going to learn is the what's actually going on when we contextualize. And as we learn that, we're going to drag it from our intuitive minds into the intentional. So that's going to be fun, and this is quite an important part of the journey, so it's going to be several months. So get yourself kind of strapped in for the next few weeks. Okay? Everybody good? Marvelous. As always, an enjoyable time. Thank you, guys. Tremendous to be with you. See you next time. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.